Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey, this is Craig Garber. You know me as host of the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, but when I'm not interviewing world-class guitar players, I'm busy helping clients with their marketing. In fact, since March of 2000, I've helped over 300 clients in 108 different industries all over the world sell everything from $20 books to $5,000 seminar seats and everything in between. I even authored a book about my experience called How to Make Maximum Money with Minimum Customers. Now, if you own or operate a business, ask yourself the following marketing-related questions and be honest with your answers. Are you generating fresh new qualified leads on a daily basis? Is your website generating enough sales? And if not, do you know why? Is your advertising effective? Is it predictably and reliably making you several multiples of what you're spending on it? And lastly, are you consistently communicating with your email list? Or do you have an email list of prospects and customers, but you have no idea what to say to them, how often to say it, or how to make money with this list? If you need solutions for these marketing problems, then you need to book a one-on-one marketing strategy session with me. After this strategy session, you'll know how to speak to and make money with your email list, how to use your website to attract customers and clients who are ready to buy from you now, and how to sell your goods and services for top dollar and at much higher profit margins than your competition. Listen, stop hoping things will get better on their own. Hope is not a very good business strategy. Instead, book a marketing strategy session with me by going to everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing and find out if your business meets the 5 criteria you need to qualify for this service. Again, that's everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing. Thanks for listening. Now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and today we're with perhaps the top luthier in Alabama, with Dennis Shaw. Dennis owns Shaw's Custom Guitar Services, and he services primarily the Huntsville and Muscle Shoals area of Alabama, although people have come and visit him from all over, apparently. He's been playing guitar since the age of 9, grew up in the Muscle Shoals area while all the major recording acts were recording there, played guitar in high school, jazz, and concert bands, and he's been influenced by Pete Carr, Glenn Campbell, and he's also heavily influenced by Lenny LeBlanc and Will McFarlane. Dennis was in a contemporary Christian band all throughout high school, and he almost got signed by Muscle Shoals Sound, but their parents would not allow them as they were under 18. Have you forgiven them for that?
That was a hard one to do.
His first good amp was a Mesa Boogie MK2A, and he played boogies only for 30 years. Interesting. He worked for Jim's Music in Muscle Shoals while he was in tech school studying electronics to start a career, and most of the studio guys that from the area would frequent Jim's store and hang out, such as Will McFarlane and Mac McAnally, and that's how Dennis became friendly with all these guys. Other influences are Phil Kagi, Jonathan Shaw, and Greg Martin, who I interviewed in episode 60, I believe, of Everyone Loves Guitar. Great person, great player. Now retired from government contracting world and working full-time as a guitar tech servicing Huntsville and the Muscle Shoals area. Dennis started the first Huntsville Amp Summit. That sounds kind of cool. What is that?
It was the thing where I wanted to get local players together, and of course everybody has different amps. And it was just a way to pull everybody together and get people in touch that didn't know each other, as well as to hear everybody's gear. So it started out in my house, and it further ventured into other venues.
That's really cool. Does that still go on today?
It has not. It's been inactive now for about 5 years.
That's pretty cool. How did you get? Was this like when the web first came out earlier on, and you were able to find people?
Yeah, that was an influence. I would read on the internet where there would be amp summits in local towns, such as Franklin, Tennessee. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea to do locally and just get people to meet up at my house and sort of have a meet and greet and say, hey, come on, bring your gear. And let's everybody hear everyone else's gear and see if that's something you would eventually want to lean towards. You know, we had anything from Mesa Boogies to vintage Marshalls, Power Vera amps, customized Fenders, you name it. It was probably in the room at the time.
That's really cool, man. It must have been a fun time.
It was. It was great.
Local influences that I want to mention on Dennis's behalf. Jim Greenhill, the late Mike Bartee, who was a really cool player and sound guy. Eric Martin, David Weinstein, Bobby Parks, Dan Spearing. Dennis also collects Gibson historic reissues, Nash guitars, Fender custom shop amps. I'm going to mess this up. Germino?
Germino.
Okay. What is Germino? I never heard of
Germanos are a hand-wired, hand-assembled amp that are pretty much toe-and-toe with the old vintage Marshalls.
Is that a local? I never heard
No,
of
Germano is in North Carolina, and the owner of the company is Greg Germano. Super nice guy to call and chat to.
Wow, I've never heard of those. I'm going to have to check those out, man.
Yeah, Greg knows the old vintage Marshall circuits inside and out, and that he created his amp line to pay tribute to those old vintage amps.
That's really cool. That's like that's the hot nostalgia amp, the Plexis, the late 60s, early 70s, 50, 100 watt heads.
Absolutely, yeah.
He also collects Fenders, Bogners, Muscle Shoals amps, and Mesa Boogie, of course. I asked Dennis to come on the show because I interviewed his nephew, John Shaw, in a two-part episode, which was episodes number 54 and 56. And I also spent a lot of time talking with John outside of the podcast. John is a great player. He's got a great work ethic, and he's actually one of the smartest guys I've ever met when it comes to buying and selling guitars. In fact, when I went up to Nashville, the first guy I called to ask if he could help me look for a 335 was John. And I was talking to him, and I said, hey, man, how did you get so smart on this? Because he's just like a hustler, and you could tell he's the kind of guy, some people flip houses. He flips guitars, but you could just tell. I mean, he said, man, I just know what to look for. And I said, well, man, how did you know that? And he just said 3 words, my Uncle Dennis. And that was it. So he told me about it. I said, let's get Uncle Dennis on the show. So, man, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh, absolutely, man. I appreciate you.
Real quick, before we get started, I want to address a potential urban myth or something that works. Big Ben's nut sauce. Is that something that actually works?
Yes, it does.
Okay, because I used it, and I didn't know, and because I'm not as smart like you are on this stuff. What does it do? And how
it is supposed to, such as if you have a plastic or a bone nut in a guitar, it tends to make a smoother surface inside the grooves where the string actually passes through the nut, so the string cannot bind and pop. Say to a semitone or flat tone, and throw your guitar out of tune. It's supposed to stay in tune better, as well as to not when you're tuning, grab a hold inside the nut and stay there until you have to take another half or a whole turn, and then it'll jump up too high and not tune properly.
Now I was with a guy named John Prestia, who's Tim McGraw's guitar tech, and he's the guy who helped me get that 335 there. And
yeah.
He uses just pencil, graphite. Is that the same thing equally?
Graphite is what is that I would most recommend.
Yeah.
The nut sauces can eventually become part of your nut, and I think can cause premature wear, at least in my opinion.
Great.
Graphite is the very best. Just carry around a wooden pencil with you, a number 2 wooden pencil, and color inside your slots. That's the very best beyond anything else.
Great. Thanks so much, because I think everybody, especially with Gibsons, you got to, intonation and tuning is a problem.
You have to. Yeah, you got to use the graphite.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's talk amps first. If someone is thinking about buying a vintage amp versus a modern amp, we were just talking about the old Marshalls, what are the things that they should be aware of, like in getting a vintage amp? For example, what kind of care and maintenance is a vintage amp going to require over a modern amp? Well,
vintage amps and modern amps, of course, a lot of the new modern amps are transistor and what have you, but I prefer tube amps, and both vintage and tube amps require replacing the tubes, keeping your amp properly biased. That'll keep the amp setting at its best.
Okay, so how often would you recommend replacing tubes? And I'm sure it obviously depends on how often you use the amp. Is there like a total hours, or what's a good rule of thumb?
No, you will start noticing a motionless in tone and where the amp just isn't sounding right. And you'll find out if you put in a new set of tubes and rebias the amp, it should bring the amp totally back to life the way that it was originally.
Okay, great. So rebiasing is something you only do when you get new tubes.
Absolutely. Some amps that are out there self-bias themselves, and you don't have to do that or go through that procedure. But should you have to, there are other There's manufacturers out there that actually make devices for that will plug into the tube sockets, and then your tubes plug into this part of its device, and you can bias your amp, and then when you're done, there should be a bias pot inside the amp to do that. The information that comes with the various devices out there will show you generally where that potentiometer is located, so as you can set the bias yourself. And then once you got it set, you just turn the amp off and unplug the device and plug your tubes back in, and you're ready to go. It's really simple.
Yeah, really simple. I'd rather. Well, I mean, to me, it's like fixing your roof. I'm going to bring my stuff to a guy like you to take care of everything, because
right.
A, you'll do it quicker. B, you'll do it correct, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, no matter how many books. Well, I mean, what I'm going to do, spend 6 weeks. It's like doing your taxes or something. You can't casually be an accountant. It's like you're either an accountant,
right.
So I always believe in working with competent people that are smarter than me and things that I don't know, and just letting the experts do it.
Right, I understand.
What are the biggest mistakes that guitarists make when they buy vintage amps? They see, because I see all the time on Reverb, 1971 Marshall 50 watt or this. I wouldn't know what to look for, what to look out for.
I would recommend buying a book on any certain vintage amp that you're looking for, or just a book generally that covers the old vintage amps such as Marshall and Fender and Vox and what have you. And learn about the amps, learn about the transformers that are in there and the various years and what transformers were put in those amps during those years. Then you can further, by educating yourself, you can go look at the amps and see if they're original or not. A lot of people out there are honest. That they will tell you if the transformer has been replaced or what has been modded or what has been done to the amp. So if you educate yourself, you know what to look for.
If work has been done on an amp, you have an amp that's, it's a 71 Marshall, let's say. So that's 46 years old, almost 47 years old at this point.
Right.
Is it unreasonable to expect that to be 100% original components?
No, most amps are going to have to be recapped in order to keep the amp sounding fresh over the years, because the capacitors inside an amp would degrade and pull down the tone of the amp. So just general maintenance on an old amp would be getting the amp recapped, new tubes, and to ensure that whether or not the transformers are original or not. Generally, that's not a problem, but if it doesn't have original transformers, that can pull down the value of the amp. Hence, that's where you can also find deals if an amp is non-original. Let's say its output transformer or the input transformer has been replaced. Odds are it was done correctly in most cases, but you can save money, as that would be a buy, a little bit of a discount on top of an amp that would be totally stock and as it was when it was made. Just another way to save money.
Sure. Does that take away from the sound?
Generally, no.
Okay. What does take away from the sound where you're buying something, for whether it's a Marshall, a Mesa Boogie, a Vox, an old Fender? What does take away from the sound that you're buying that amp for?
An amp that has not been serviced correctly, hasn't been biased correctly, or say if you had a combo, maybe the speaker is bad. Maybe the speaker is frozen and you would need to replace the speaker with something newer. Or either get the old speaker reconed.
But that can all be restored to make it sound like it did originally.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So the upside to this is no matter how much you might get skunked on the purchase price, or if you didn't know things, if you bring it to a competent person, a guy like yourself who's got that kind of knowledge base, you'll have it back to square one as if it was not brand new, but the sound that you want.
No, that's correct. Absolutely.
Great. Is there ever a situation where you would say it's safe to buy something online, sight unseen, assuming the person's being honest with you about the description of the amp, or is there always a risk involved and you're better off listening?
There's always a risk, but I would always ask the seller for a period such as 48 or 72 hours for you to, from the time it lands at your doorstep, for you to be able to go through it and look at it and be sure that it meets the specifications, that were described by the seller in the ad, and to ensure that the product is okay. And then say if it isn't, you've got that agreement up front where they'll take the product back.
That's a good deal. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and especially if you have that in writing. This way, if you're paying by credit card, all you have to do is show them the credit card and tell them, you should have no problem getting a refund.
That's correct.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really
if the seller is not willing to give you a trial period, I would run away from the product.
Yeah, and 48 to 72 hours is not exact. It's not like you're asking for 30 days test run that's really, really reasonable.
Absolutely, it is.
Let's switch over to modern amps now, and let's still stay on tube amps, because I think most of the people listening to this, I think more of them buy tube amps than not, and I think the ones who are not are probably buying the Kemper modelers and stuff like that.
Right.
But what are the biggest mistakes guitar players make when they're buying modern tube amps?
That's kind of a hard question. It's going to depend on what the buyer is looking for. If they're looking for a specific sound from a specific artist, I would always recommend that they once again do their research and see what that person is using, and then go after that specific model of amp. And once again, educating yourself as far as being able to recognize if an amp is stock or if it's been modified at all.
In your opinion, what do you feel the best modern amps are out there as far as value, meaning sound, durability, and integrity of the product not breaking down?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I could speak of my favorites. I love Mesa Boogie amps. I love Germinos, Bogner amps, Fenders, and I generally don't have any breakdown issues whatsoever.
Even on the newer Fenders?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Well, the newer Fenders are not point-to-point. They're unless you get a custom shop amp.
Sure.
And then those will be made like the old ones. The issue with that is Fender's pricing. Let's say, for example, they just reissued the vintage Blackface Deluxe hand-wired. That amp, I believe, is $24.99. Well, you can get an original one for that.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. So it doesn't really pay.
No, it doesn't.
Let's flip to the other side. What is some of the most overrated or worst values out there with respect to modern amps?
That kind of a tough one there. I haven't run into any very big issues. I've heard of anyone having specific issues with certain amps. I mean, a lot of the manufacturers are really striving to put out the best product they can. They're doing the same thing that they did years ago. While the old amps were hand wired, that's just how they were back then. Now they go by the cheapest process possible, and a lot of times use cheaper components just to get the amps at the door at a lower price where people can afford them. So once again, educating yourself and knowing what you're going after to buy. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I just don't know of anything that has a tendency to break down off the top of my head.
Would you say, there's so many companies out there that are, I use the word boutique, but I think you know what I'm saying, where they're making,
sure.
like Germino, another company in North Carolina, Carr. There's just tons of smaller amp makers.
That's correct.
Would you, with guitars, the problem is when you buy something outside of, let's say, Gibson, Gibson, Fender, to a lesser extent PRS, but if after those three models, the problem when you buy one of those guitars is a devaluation.
Correct.
On resale. Is it the same thing with some of these boutique amps? Because I know a lot of guys, and a lot of guys that have some great little boutique amps, and they're
That's
just
right.
killer. Is there the same devaluation with that, or?
There is, depending on the amp and how popular the amp is. Let's say, for example, Two-Rock. If you were to get a little Two-Rock combo of some sort, or even a head, they tend to be rather pricey. However, reselling those amps are pricey as well. They generally don't lose much value once you purchase the amp.
Okay, interesting. So it's individual. Some of them you'll see it and some of them you won't. Again, you got to do your research. Yeah. And hey,
absolutely.
With reverb, there's no reason, I mean, for valuation anyway, there's no reason why you can't do research. I mean, that's your encyclopedia of, like,
it is.
What are things selling for, and you can go and look.
Absolutely.
Greg Martin, I know that you love Greg's tone the way I do.
Oh, yeah.
If I wanted to, I mean, he's a monster, and it's just wire, cable, amp, boom. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, Greg is a fire-breathing dragon. He is one of the most tasteful players that I've ever known out there. He's just absolutely tremendous in all ways. Period. And
an equally stellar human being on top of that.
Yes, he is.
And it's interesting. He kind of mentored and I think he co-produced or part of an album. He mentored these guys out of Kentucky called Otis, O-T-I-S, a new band, blues band, really good. They're kind of like Paul Kossoff meets, back that era, right? And
right.
I interviewed those guys, and they do the same freaking thing. It's just amp, cable, and they said Greg got us all in vintage gear. They all have late 60s, early 70s, 50, 100-watt Marshall heads.
Right, yeah.
And they're, it's the same thing. And so my question is, if I wanted to get that kind of a tone, but in a bedroom amp combo, because I'm not playing out gigs, and I'm not, to get a 50-watt Marshall head even is way overkill. What amp would you suggest I looked at buying?
It would totally depend on your budget and what you wanted to spend. You can get newer Marshall combos that would probably suit that purpose. There again, if you had a pocketbook that would allow you to spend a couple grand on an amp, I would go with the Germino amps, and you would get real close to Greg's tone there. And there's another amp out there called Reason, and that almost I had one of those heads once. I forget the specific model, but plugging straight into that, it was Greg's tone straight out of the box, just awesome. Guitar and cable.
Really? It's called Reason. Where are they out of?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't remember. But there again, my favorite for that style of amp, just go straight in and crank the amp, would be a Germino.
But so let's talk about that now. For $2,000 though, I can get a new Germino, or I can probably buy a 71 50-watt Marshall head for $2,000.
True.
Which one do you do?
Yes, you can. I would buy first. That's the buyer preference. If the buyer wants a true vintage amp, then they can go all out and get the true vintage amp. You can get, let's say, a 1973. There's a certain era in there where they were still making the metal panel Marshalls a little bit past 72 into 73, and even though it would be a 73 instead of a 72, you can save some money there and land one of those in rather good condition for around $1,850.
Wow. So then it's just a question of, as you said, buyer preference. Do you want that? I mean, it's something about when you're sitting there looking at an old Marshall that.
Oh yeah.
That's.
I mean that is the tone. But if you're like me and you, as much as you love that tone, you'd rather go ahead and invest in something that's brand new and has all brand new parts, and you know that at least for your lifetime you have no worries at all of a transformer or something going out. Then you move over to something like a Germino, or even one of the newer hand-wired Marshalls.
Sure.
There again, you're in the mid 2s to 3s when you go with those.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to definitely check those the Germinos out. What's the most common repair or problem you do, either on a guitar or on an amp, or both if you'd like, that can be prevented with a little basic maintenance and care?
I see a tremendous amount of nut replacements, and that's just something that's going to happen over time, and you have to replace a nut like on acoustic or even electric. Some of the newer instruments are being made in quantity, and when they get out the door, the nut slots may be cut too high, and you need to bring those down to spec. And intonation on electric guitars especially are made to get out the door as quickly as possible, and they're probably not intonated. And when they go on the shelves in the store, you need to get that guitar intonated so it will sound its best. I've seen a few broken headstocks. I guess since I started this, I've repaired those with 100% success and no issues.
There's no way to prevent a headstock from breaking, is there? It's just bad luck of the draw, right?
It's bad luck of the draw. If your guitar stand tips over and it falls and hits whatever the floor is made of, and the headstock hits first, it's going to snap it off. You just got to be careful and not let that happen. You know, accidents happen. When they do, then you just got to get them fixed.
Yeah. Silly question, but I think it's important because nobody really that I know has ever given me a reasonable answer outside of, when I think they should be changed. But how often should strings be changed? Is there really a definitive answer on that, or is it depends?
No, it just depends on the acidity in your hands and fingers and how fast you wear strings out.
So it's like asking how often should you replace your sneakers?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've seen players that can wear out strings due to the high acidity in their fingers. The strings will be black in 20 minutes.
Oh wow. Yeah. How often does John have to change his strings? Your nephew?
Probably every show.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he's tearing it up though.
John is absolutely tearing it up. But he's one of the unfortunate people that does have a high acidity, and his strings go black on him rather quickly.
That's cool. Hey, for whatever it's worth, if John's tech is listening, he has told me how valuable you are to him. So whatever you're doing, he's real happy about it. Let's talk guitars. If someone's thinking about buying a vintage guitar versus a modern guitar, same questions as before as with the amps. What kind of care and maintenance is a vintage guitar going to require over a modern guitar?
Well, if someone's going after a vintage guitar, they're going to, I'd say, very extreme in prices. If the guitar is the cleaner the condition, the more the price. The less clean the condition, then the lower the price. Let's say, for example, if tuner's been replaced, that lowers the price of a vintage instrument. If the pickups have been replaced, that lowers the price of a vintage instrument. But bear in mind, let's say if you had a vintage Fender Strat and the pickups had opened up and they had to replace those just out of need because the original ones didn't work anymore, you can land a deal with a guitar such as that and getting it for a lower price. If the inside workings, if the pots have been changed or capacitor has changed, anything that made that guitar non-original saves you money, and you can own old wood for a good price.
Okay, so let's say that happens and you find a deal like that. How much of the sound is impacted when the pickups had to be replaced?
Well, there are a lot of newer manufacturers that produce fantastic pickups that will get that instrument sounding as good as it can to the original. Of course, original PALs will be original PALs. I've heard those pickups, they're all over the place, from extremely bright to extremely mellow, hot output to low output. I think Greg's 58 is probably a low output pickup.
You talking about his actual guitar, or are you talking about the reissue?
His actual guitar, the original one. Humbucking pickups, manufacturers, they're all over the map. My favorite is OX4s. They're out of England. I happen to be an OX4 dealer. Strat pickups, I tend to lean towards Lindy Fralin, or my favorite is JM Rolfs, ROLPHS.
Where are they out of?
I want to say JM is out of Kentucky, but I may be wrong there. He's not too far from the Alabama area. I don't think. I've talked with him over the phone. Super individual to deal with.
Are you a dealer for those guys as well?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So what you're saying is if you have to do a replacement and you invest, because those OX4 pickups are pricey. I mean, they're like $400 for a set. That being said, you're getting what you're paying for with those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's like that pretty much with everything. You know, I think I've always had a philosophy. I don't mind spending money. What I mind is not getting value.
True.
You know, if I'm spending money and I'm getting value, it's all good. But if you're, you know, I never have a problem with that. But it's when you're spending money and value is questionable. I don't think anybody wants to do.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with you.
When the average guitar player buys a vintage guitar, what is some of the mistakes that he or she typically makes and things they overlook?
Well, fenders are one thing that can turn into a disaster because you have a pick guard that covers a lot of the body. Same thing on a Telecaster. I've worked in stores before, such as Jim's Music. The owner was Jim Greenhill, and was a very, very good close friend of mine. I learned back then that you can be lifting the pick guard off a Strat to do some working under there, and someone's gone after it with a chisel.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's say they wanted to put a humbucker in the bridge pickup area, and they didn't know to use a router or have somebody professionally do it. They'll just go in there with a hammer and chisel and knock out a hole, and bam, there they go. And you will never see it because it's covered by the pick guard. I've seen the same thing on a Telecaster. In the neck pickup position where someone wanted to put a humbucker in it and they just used a hammer and chisel.
So the bottom line is if you're buying a vintage guitar, take off the pick guard.
Take off the pick guard on a Fender, take off the back plate on Gibsons and see if the wiring is original, if the capacitor is original, pots and what have you. Absolutely.
Wow, that's good information there. What's the best and worst deal you've ever made with respect to guitars or amps or any kind of gear?
The best or worst deal?
Yeah, what's the best deal you've ever done and the worst deal you've ever done? If there is a worst one, you might not have done it. I mean, if you trained John, they probably didn't have any worst deals. That guy's a freaking shark.
Yeah,
he is, man. He's a smart. I swear to God, I called one guy. The first guy, I said, "John, do you have time to come guitar shopping with me?" And he said, "Hell yeah." He goes, "I love shopping for guitars, even other people's money." I'm like, "Thank you so much."
Oh yeah. He's something else. I'm sure John could probably talk all night on Gibsons, and he could probably talk 2 or 3 hours about Fenders. But Jonathan's he's my hero. He's a real sharp cat. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So back to what was the question again? I'm losing track.
Sorry, man. What's the best deal and the worst deal you've ever made with respect to guitars or gears?
Worst deal I ever made, and fortunately it was fixable. I bought a real gorgeous G&L ASAT online, and this is back in the mid-90s. And when it came in, the guitar just sounded dead. It had no life about it whatsoever. And this is before I got into the work that I'm doing now. And so I took it up to Joe Glazer in Nashville and said, look at this thing, see if you can fix it. And what had happened was, for whatever reason, there was a greasy type substance, which I could see but didn't know what it was, all over the bridge pickup faceplate. And it apparently was in under it as well. Why someone would do that, I don't know, but it was just killing the sound of that whole assembly right there. And when they took it off and cleaned it and then put it back together, then the individual saddles were making good contact metal to metal, so to speak. As before it wasn't, because it was meeting grease, metal to grease.
It's really
and it
weird.
brought the guitar back to life. Yeah, that was a scary time. I thought I'd really wasted my money. Best investment I've made is in the vintage historic reissues that Gibson makes, as well as Fenders.
You mean the R9s, the R8s?
Absolutely, R6s, R0s, you name it, and then the custom shop Fenders are all just absolutely fantastic guitars.
What is an R0?
That's a 1960.
Do any of those reissues? Like, I'm not a big guy. I'm only 5'9", and my hands are, therefore average. Like, I love that 335 because it's got a real slim neck. Do any of the Gibson Customs have those reissues have slim necks like that?
Yes, the 1960 will have a slimmer neck, maybe similar to what's on your 335.
Oh my God. I mean, honestly, I haven't played anything else since I've gotten this. This is just like, I mean, on it, it's, when it's like, you know what it's like when you get something, it's like,
oh yeah. Yeah, I do. And it's possible it's your 335, depending on what it is. I would have to see it and hold it, but it could have an R9 neck on it as well, because the R9 neck is pretty dead on to what the old necks were back in the vintage days in the 50s and the early 60s. The 58 reissues, those have chunky necks, and the 57s or the R7s have chunky necks. But your 335 will have one of the two, either an R0 or a 59 neck on it.
All right. Profile. Well, I went to Gibson and I asked them. I gave them the serial number. I'll tell you what they said here. They said something here about 1960 slim taper neck profile.
Okay.
But here's the weird thing about this. They said that this neck was satin model in faded cherry finish. Now, you probably can't see that clearly, but that's not a satin guitar at all, and it's not faded cherry. And I asked them, I said, I said that to them. I said, it's not satin, it's not faded. And they said, well, maybe the guy who bought it, because he put the Bigsby on afterwards, maybe he coated it. I don't know, but let me tell you what was interesting. The guy bought it worked at Gibson.
Okay.
So and that's where, he had the Bigsby put on right there, because I wasn't going to buy it originally because, I saw that the Bigsby was added on. I'm thinking, some dude is in his freaking garage drilling holes in there. I didn't want to deal with that, but it was done at Gibson, so I was cool with it. And but I'm wondering if he somehow, got a guitar and just had all these extras done to it, sort of like under the.
I kind of doubt it. Odds are it wasn't buffed all the way down to be truly satin. They didn't go that far down into the nitro.
Oh, okay.
Would be my guess.
Yeah. So is that a mistake then on their part, or saying it was satin, or?
They tend to label things, a lot as, even though that was the intent as to what that guitar was going to be, it didn't turn out that way. It just wasn't buffed all the way down.
Okay, I get you. Yeah, because I've seen satin guitars. I've played them. They're not. This doesn't look anything like it.
Yeah, well, you can also. It's also in the feel and in the back of the neck. You can tell if the back of the neck is that satin or not, or if it has lacquer on it. If they didn't buff it all the way.
It's smooth. It's lacquered. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's totally lacquered. Yeah, the whole thing is weird, but I love it. That's something that's never leaving my side. I can tell you that. Yeah, no, that's.
I don't blame you. We all have those.
Yeah, I actually told my wife and kids, if something happens, just hang on to that one. I don't know why. Like, it's what the hell,
yeah.
Like it's going to impact me.
Oh yeah, we all have our favorites.
Okay, so if you could go back and give advice to your younger self, what advice would you have given as it relates to guitars, amps, or playing music?
Get into the early blues and jazz artists and learn what they're playing. Copy as much of it as you possibly can. Learn how to play their styles. Learn their equipment they were using to get their sound.
That's really good advice. Have you ever heard of a blues player? It's kind of like blues jazz called Grant Green.
I haven't. No, I haven't heard of Grant.
I just got turned on to him. He's a pretty interesting guy. I'm not really a jazz guy, but he's sort of like a hybrid. He's a very good blues player.
I'll have to check him out.
Yeah.
Well, Frampton kind of does kind of a rock jazz thing in his soloing.
Yeah, he kind of does. That's right. He's not just playing, blues for sure. I've seen him. No. I've seen him live. He came down, when he did the 35th anniversary tour, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago.
Right.
And it was a great concert, man. It was a great.
Oh yeah.
Because we're the same age, we're pretty close, and so you probably remember, like I do, sitting there with the double album open, listening to it 100 times over, right?
Oh yeah, I wore that album out.
So it was cool to see him. And what was really funny is during the show, He said, I want to introduce my keyboard player. And I was expecting to say, you know, that famous line, Bob Mayo. Bob Mayo passed away, apparently, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was unfortunate. Yeah.
But and he said the name. I was like, what? Why isn't it Bob Mayo? It was just, you know, because that line, I've heard it literally hundreds of times. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what's the favorite part of what you do, Dennis, and the least favorite, if there is one?
I wouldn't say I have a least favorite. I love working on guitars and trying to help out my customers best I can to give them back what they're wanting out of their guitars.
Cool.
You know, they want great playability, they want great action, and they need something restored that's been cracked or broken. I try and help them out as best I can, as humanly possible as I can, to give them a good product back.
Any hobbies or interests outside of music or guitars?
No, not really. I like going on vacation like anybody else does, but music has always been my hobby. Going to concerts and playing guitar myself, and having a small collection as it is, and just enjoying it.
Cool.
You know, music lifts the soul and lifts the spirit, and it definitely does for me.
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm with you on that. Are you a hunter? Because I know John hunts and fishes. He's kind of an outdoors guy. I'm assuming he got some of that from you.
No, he got it from his dad and my brother. I did when I was a kid, but I really not into that anymore. I have a problem going out and having a gun and then aiming it at something, seeing two eyes looking back at me saying, "Please don't pull that trigger." I can't do it. Not anymore.
I hear you, man.
But
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to say it. One of the things that's really helps is the local people here and the local friends that I have. We got Don Parker that owns Shoals Guitar Boutique in Muscle Shoals. I do work for them. Counts Brothers Music, James Counts, repair guitars for them as well. And Jim Greenhill, my old friend or young friend, ever how you want to put it, that owns Jim's music. Jim's a great guy, and we talk gear all the time. I could have names: Charlie Davidson, Mike Barty, unfortunately that's gone, but Mike was a local artist that everyone really looked up to, because there was just nothing that Mike couldn't play. And he had some of the best ears for PA in the business, period. And it's unfortunate that he's not with us anymore. But Bobby Parks and David Weinstein and just all my friends, you know, we support each other. We all talk gear over the phone. And it's literally an addiction.
Well, it's good.
You know,
hey, man.
It's a good thing.
Well, you're if you're doing all these repairs in Muscle Shoals, that says a lot about you too, because it's not like that's a green community with respect to guitars, man. Those guys are, you know, they're pretty demanding as to what they're looking for results wise.
Oh,
so.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Two more questions, man. Best advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Oh, well, that's a tough one. Best advice I've been given. I guess from David Weinstein, as far as looking at Fenders. He said, get the lightest guitar, get the lightest one that you can find. Same thing goes with Gibsons, but it's harder on a Gibson, but you can find lightweight Fenders.
Yeah. You know, the newer Gibsons, like that one is I think it's a 2010. It's a Les Paul the classic, and then I had one that was like a 2013. It was a standard. They were both pretty light because they're chambered inside. I was really very pleasantly surprised. I mean, you know, and I was talking to a guy. I have a guy coming on the show. His name is Christian Carlson. He plays for a really good sort of psychedelic rock band in Sweden, and he's got a '78 Black Beauty. I'm like, man, what is that?
Oh, wow.
What does that thing weigh? He goes, it weighs a ton, you know?
Yeah, probably 10 or 11 pounds.
Yeah. So.
Jim Seals handed me a Les Paul Classic last week. Jim used to play with Shenandoah, and he handed it to me. I would bet that guitar weighed about 5.5 pounds.
Wow.
It was the lightest Les Paul I've ever picked up in my entire life.
That's amazing. That is really light. 5.5 pounds. Wow.
Well, I'm guessing it may have been 6.5, but it was so light. It was the lightest one I've ever picked up to this day.
Man, you catch bass bigger than that.
That's right.
Seriously.
Sure can. Yeah, no kidding, man. Yeah, for sure.
Last question, man. You seem like a really happy guy, so I'm going to ask you, what's your definition of happiness?
Definition of happiness? Believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing. A lot of my happiness is based on faith and my belief. I've just always been a happy guy. I learned that from my parents.
That's great.
They're both deceased now, but my mom was one of the most joyous people that you could ever meet, and I guess I got that from her.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, every interaction I've had with you, it's like you're always so super pleasant. You're just just one of these guys that nice is coming off it. So it's you're an easy guy to deal with.
What do you accomplish being the other way? I just
I know.
I just like people.
Yeah.
As you said, I love interacting and talking with people and see what their hobbies are and what they do and what they enjoy, and it's just a great thing, man. It just gets me. I just excited every time when I meet new people.
Well, man, let me tell people where they could find you. If you are in the Muscle Shoals area and you need anything done on your guitars or amps, especially if other people have not been able to figure it out, bring him to Dennis. He's a super sharp guy, and you can find him at shawscustomguitarservice.com, SHAWS Custom Guitar Services, services plural.com.
Correct.
You could find him online on Facebook, and honestly, he's really a incredibly competent, bright guy, and he's one of the nicest people you'll deal with. Also, if you're looking for guidance on humbuckers and replacement pickups, he's an authorized dealer for OX4 and Lindy Fralin on the single coil side. Anything else I missed that you want to talk about?
I'm a believer in the Fralins. We do have a local dealer for that, and that would be David Weinstein. I'm not a dealer for Fralins, but they're fantastic single coil pickups or Fender or replacement pickups. They're just great.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Man, I appreciate you, absolutely, and I really appreciate your time and getting my name out there.
Of course, man. Everybody, check out Dennis Shaw. He's a really good guy, and he's a very sharp. Any kind of luthier work you need, and he'll fix any problems. And I know this not because he's a guest on my show, but I've spent a lot of time with his nephew, and John is a lead guitar player for Josh Turner. He's been in that slot for a long time. He's a total go-getter, and he works his ass off, and he could not stop talking about how much of an impact you've had on his knowledge base and on the quality of what you do. So man, I say this out of looking to help somebody else. If they need some help, go visit Dennis, man.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
You got it, buddy. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I hope you got as much out of it as I did, because I learned quite a bit. Dennis, thanks again for spending time with us. Thanks to Dennis Shaw. I really appreciate it. And you all go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get notified about future episodes, along with some cool new stuff we're rolling out for guitar players soon. Now, be nice, go play your guitar, and most important, have fun. Till next time, I'm out, everybody. Peace. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.